This story starts more than a year ago, maybe January of 2019, when Remote ID was on everybody's minds. Remote ID and the Notice of Proposed Rulemaking, which in many ways threatens to end the practice of FPV as we know it. And if you think I'm being hyperbolic, if you think I'm trying to scare you just to get you to watch a video, I wish that were true. It's not. Now, we're not going to go into all of the details of Remote ID and the Notice of Proposed Rulemaking. There's another video that I'm going to put in the cards at the end of this video from a year ago where I went deep about the reasons why this is a threat to FPV as we know it. What I'm here today to do is to talk about what we are doing now. What has happened since January of 2019? A lot's happened. And a lot of things may be more important than our little hobby that people have been thinking about. But the wheels have been turning, and not in a good direction. So I have some guests with me today that I would like you guys to meet. And we're going to talk about what has happened, where are we at now, and what is being done and what can be done to try to turn this thing maybe at the last possible minute. Why don't you guys go ahead and introduce yourself?
My name's Tyler Brennan, and I'm the owner of RaceDayQuads.
I'm Jonathan Ruprecht. I'm an aviation attorney and a commercial pilot.
And you are also, for the record, an FPV enthusiast, I hear.
The free rider, I've played that a lot. Good grief. I've done that, and yes, I actually got into a model aircraft when I was, 15. So I've been doing that for quite a while.
Well, it's nice to know that you have some skin in the game of this fight that we are approaching. So let's talk about briefly, what is Remote ID and the Notice of Proposed Rulemaking, and why are we all so up in arms about fighting it?
Yes, so Remote ID is primarily it's requiring all unmanned aircraft that are over 0.55 pounds that are not flying inside a FAA identification zone for unmanned aircraft to be broadcasting one of two ways. And that becomes very problematic from a hardware standpoint, also from a privacy standpoint. And it's going to be most likely potentially going into effect sometime in December, because how the rulemaking process works is there's a notice, we comment, and the notice happened back in back part of December of 2019. So most people read it in January, and then the comments all came in. They had to come in by back part of March. It was actually by March. And then the FAA took all those 53,000 comments, they analyzed them, and they kind of came up with the best way to respond to each of those points, the technical points, legal points. And then once they've done that, they put it together, send it to the Department of Transportation. Department of Transportation reviews that, and then they sign off on it, and then they send it to the Office of Management and Budget. Well, on October the 5th, we found out that the Office of Management and Budget had received the final rules for Over People, Night, and Remote ID. And so they're presently reviewing it right now. So there is a real possibility that this could all go to be published in the Federal Register sometime this December, which is the deadline the FAA is shooting for. And if they do publish it, it'll go into effect about 60 days later after publishing. And the key important point there is that the law will go into effect, but you won't have to comply with it until a little bit later on. So it's not like it'll go immediately into effect in January, February, you're shut down. There'll be at least a 24-month window there that all of the manufacturers will have to start complying. And then with 36 months, then everybody will have to be complying. So it'll phase in over time.
But it is significant. When we talked about this a year ago, it was like, well, this thing might happen. We should comment. We should march. We should protest. But it was all very sort of vague and ephemeral, and maybe the course would change. And where we're at right now is that the course has not changed. In fact, I dare say, I feel like the marching and the protesting and the letter writing and the commenting, it was important that we do it. But on some level, it's not surprising that they were like, isn't that nice? Now we've ticked all the boxes and we're going to do what we wanted to do anyway. Meh. And that brings us to where we're at now, which is the next steps. And that's why there's a lawyer in the room, right?
Right. Well, so there's a valuable aspect to commenting. One, because you're just informing the FAA, right, as to what's going on. So there's a practical matter. They might want to know about some certain things they've left out. Two, when you do comment, you're preserving that issue later on for appeal if there is an actual challenge. Because the kind of what happens with the case law is they don't want you to just do absolutely nothing and then just show up later on and then sue the FAA and sandbag them. So there is a real actual legal ramification of not commenting. So when you did comment, that was actually very valuable because now it put the FAA on notice that they have to respond in some meaningful way to that issue. If they don't, then if they just completely ignore it, if there is an actual lawsuit challenge, then the FAA is going to look very arbitrary and capricious for just completely disregarding something Joshua said or Tyler said and say, whatever, we're going to do our own thing. That's very arbitrary and capricious. And so there is legal ramifications for not and also comment.
Well, they are legally required to go over all the. I think they're legally required to go over all the comments, and I'm not sure how much attention they pay to them, but a lot of comments were left.
There's 53,000 that were done, and there's people that keep on publishing them. So there's a window there that you had to publish by, but people kept on publishing, and so I mean, the FAA, are they paying attention to those things? Yes, they could. If there's new information that comes out that nobody's really aware of, it might be helpful to post it to the docket so as to alert the FAA to it. However, at this point, the FAA has already signed off internally the rulemaking and sent it over to DOT, who has signed off on it, and that's why it's over at OMB right now. So it's kind of very late stage. After OMB approves it, then what happens is it actually gets published in the Federal Register if it gets signed off on, right. And then it'll go into effect. So it's kind of like the last pretty much stage before it'll come out. But we don't know exactly what it says. So some people, I know there's maybe a hopelessness some people might feel to the situation and say, hey, it's coming out, the FAA did nothing. However, we don't know what the final rule said. We only know what the NPRM said. The final rule could have been amended, and they said, oh man, this is going to be too much trouble if we try to do this one thing or that thing. And they could have potentially, based upon the 53,000 comments, adjusted how the regulations are written in the final form.
Well, I think that's that would be great because the regulations, as they were written in the notice of proposed rulemaking, I mean, people say, well, maybe I don't like broadcasting my location and my identification in real time, but I guess if that's what I got to do, at least I could still fly my quads. But that's certainly not how it stands, because you wouldn't be able to build quads and fly them yourself as just an individual under the proposed rules anyway.
Well, at least not easily. I mean, you're gonna have to put out all sorts of information in regards to like a declaration of compliance. If you're building it from parts and pieces, if you have like 100% kit, yeah, then the manufacturer has the 100% kit. But I don't know too many people that purchase like 100% kit. I mean, you could, but typically people are buying stuff and upgrading stuff, and I don't really want that one. I want this one, right? You kind of piece it all together, and so it becomes problematic because then that person becomes a manufacturer, right? And then they have to do all this extra stuff. If they don't, then they're going to have to actually fly over in one of these FAA identification zones, free as the restricted identification areas. And that becomes kind of problematic. And because a CBO has to be actually recognized, and then they have to apply, and they have 12 months to apply. So even if some CBO were to come out right now, other than like the AMA, right, they have to get up and running, get recognized, and then have to apply and have to do it within 12 months. That like locks in the top end of how many of these frees that are going to be out there ever, right? And then unless the FAA has modified that, because that seems kind of problematic, is to lock in that number as the max number, because you're kind of giving a head start to any CBOs that are currently in existence, but not any future CBOs, right, that might want to come down the line and create some more frees, and you're locked in. So even if you added more groups, right, you're kind of stuck with the ones from the original 12, and you got to renew them every 48 months. And the FAA's overall idea on this is that technology would increase to where people flying FPV or something at these frees could just be able to comply with like standard aircraft broadcasting, which requires certain things like a GPS receiver can be put on there, but with the actual pressure altimeter for the aircraft and as well as the controller, it becomes kind of problematic. And the FAA is not really, at least in the NPRM stage, did not really kind of realize that there's something of a hardware upgrade here that's going to have to happen to the aircraft as well as the controllers, which might be expensive as well as actually technologically unfeasible.
They seemed to assume in writing the NPRM that the vast majority of existing aircraft could be upgraded, software upgraded to support these requirements, and it wouldn't be an imposition. And of course, as hobbyists, we know that that's not true, that there are far more hobbyists out there building their own multi-rotors and fixed-wing aircraft, RC aircraft, than the FAA was even aware of. And that we would all be impacted and basically unable to comply with this.
Right. I also think I think it's also worth noting, like kind of touching on something that John said, was that, some people are going to write in the comments, hey, the rule hasn't come out. Why are we doing anything? Right. And so when you flash back to, I think it was February that I announced that, hey, RaceDayQuads is going to intend to challenge this legally, right? Which is where John comes in. And for the record, John just represents the legal team of people that we also have working on this, right? It's not just a one-man show. I think the issue in the topic is big and too important to just have one person working on it, although John is extremely capable and I do very much trust him. But, and I said, hey, we're gonna challenge this as much as we can legally. We're gonna explore it, and we certainly have done that. But there was really two avenues that, in my opinion, that you can't like this, and that is one, education. So teaching not only the public but the FAA about what it is that we do as FPV pilots, as hobbyists, as model aviation pilots, and teaching them about what it is that they're actually regulating, and showing them that, hey, there is a group out here. Hello, look at us. Don't forget about us. Because, I was asked you a question the other day, hey, where does FPV fit into this whole NPRM, the commercial drones getting integrated into the airspace, right? And my answer was that based on the NPRM, it clearly doesn't. There really is they are kind of putting us in a corner, making broad, vast assumptions on what we have and what we can do and who we are. That are just totally not feasible for us to go out there and continue. So, and so people are going to say, hey, the rule hasn't come out yet. And so, the hope here, let's not get this wrong. Like we are not dying to go out there and like spend a bunch of time on a legal battle. My hope is that this rule comes out, and thanks to the comments, the letters, the calls, and the broad education that not only the FPV people have done, but people all across model aviation has created a rule that allows us to continue how we are flying. So, for example, they just go out there and just broadly say, hey, this rule does not apply below 300 feet, right? Then we can be like, all right, sweet, doesn't apply to us, case dropped. For all intents and purposes, we won. But it is because the rule and the issue is so broad, that's where we have to, we really have spent the better part, the last 8 months constantly preparing for a legal battle, fighting, just assuming that worst case scenario, the NPRM is published as it was written.
Yeah.
So that's why we're here now.
I think what I hear you saying is that the goal of this action is not necessarily to abolish or roll back or the NPRM, that we acknowledge that it's going to go through in some form, but to carve out enough of a space for the hobby as we know it to continue in a safe manner.
Yeah, exactly. And it's also important to recognize that, we, people say, well, RaceDayQuads, it's not like, It's not like Google or Amazon or anything, right? So we're being very laser focused on, let's do what we can to make sure that FPV is cared for. And if the rule comes out such that, in our opinion, FPV can continue how it does today, then we won't file an appeal.
I'm curious, Tyler. We've talked about this a lot in other videos from the hobbyist perspective, and how this ruling will affect hobbyists' ability to practice. I'm curious what your perspective is as a business owner and someone who runs an FPV store. I mean, can stores like RaceDayQuads continue to exist? Not to put too fine a point on it, if this goes through.
I would say yes, but certainly not in our current form. I mean, we are very right now. We're let's say overall retail companies 2020, like we're doing good right now. Manufacturers are doing good right now. But when it'll kind of be like, if you buy from some websites and you go and you buy it at VTX in a pop-up that says, hey, just so you know, you need to have a ham license to operate this. You can't use X, Y, and Z frequencies, right? And while most people, like if you bought it, you clicked acknowledge and you bought it. And most people that are watching this are probably like, yeah, I don't care. But there are certainly many cases where someone sees that pop up. Let's say a mom buying something for her son says, oh, well, my son doesn't have a ham license. And click, let me get something else. Let's go a different avenue for Christmas. And so those effects will build up. And I think that the overall effects on retailers could be I think we would still exist. But I mean, right now we have like 5,800 different items on the website. I would expect that to significantly drop.
There's no doubt that the existence of this regulation will have a dampening effect on the growth of the hobby. I already hear people saying, hey, I thought FPV was pretty cool. I thought about getting into it, but now I hear there's this regulation and maybe it's all going to die in 2 years anyway, so maybe I shouldn't bother. I mean, that's already happening. To which I say, 2 years is number one, 2 years is a long time. And number two, there's every expectation that in one form or another, people will still be able to participate in the hobby, maybe just not the form that we currently enjoy it, although that's obviously what we want to fight for.
Right. And people have also brought up the concern to me that, the FAA could really kill this was if they went after the retailers in some form and affected our way to get the items to you, right, which is our whole job. I based on the NPRM, and correct me if I'm wrong here, John, but it not relating to aircraft below 250 grams. I think that based on that alone would allow us to continue to operate because we don't. I have no way of knowing what the weight of the aircraft that you're putting it into is going to be.
Yeah, I see.
You see what I'm saying? So
I do. Yeah. Well, the other sort of avenue there that I imagined was that it only affects aircraft. So if I buy a set of brushless motors and a flight controller, I could be putting that in a ground vehicle.
Right.
But that is not, those kind of sort of wink wink exceptions are not where we want to shoot for. That is where we might end up if we have to retreat from the fight. And I want to talk about the fight because that's where we're at now. And that's, like I said earlier, why there's a lawyer on this call and not just us enthusiasts, because it has come to the point where now there was a time when writing letters and filling out comments was the thing to do. And now it's time to do the next step, which is prepare a legal battle. Is that basically where we're at?
That's what I would say, but this, we've been working on this for quite some time. So, but I think it's important for people to realize that this is definitely coming. John, do we want to talk about a little bit about, people are going to say, well, how exactly like, what is the process? How quickly is that going to happen? You know, maybe want to talk about a bit like how this whole appeal is going to happen. What are some overarching issues, legal issues with the NPRM as it's currently written?
Sure. Yeah. So from like next steps standpoint, we're going to be waiting for the final rule to be published, and we don't know exactly what it will say, but we do know that there's a certain potential set of outcomes. It's kind of it's called the logical outgrowth doctrine, and so you can't just like say one thing and then completely do a bait and switch with the NPRM unless there's some real good reason there going on. So we kind of know that they're going to be coming out with the final rule, something in the ballpark from what the NPRM was, but they might pull back on certain things. So we kind of know there's a certain range of responses that we can have on particular arguments. Well, when it comes out, how it's written now with the law, we have 60 days to challenge. And so we're going to have to digest all that information. And from what we've already done, determine the best course of action, right? Then we file a petition. We're going to file a petition, and we have multiple options there in regards to federal courts. And then most likely that'll be ruled upon sometime within about a year and a half or so later, which is going to be prior to the 24-month date of compliance that the manufacturers will have to comply with. So it's most likely we'll get a ruling where a court could uphold it, right, or strike it down, or send it back to potentially the FAA for them to kind of rework some portion of it if there is an ability to work it out. I don't know. So there's a range of options that the court could do, but we would probably get something of an answer about a year and a half later after we file the lawsuit. Now, regarding the bigger issues, there's a number of issues, and there's been a lot that has been raised in the 53,000 comments. There's all sorts of interesting factual issues. The FAA underestimated certain numbers or underestimated the number of recreational aircraft, the number of FPV rate flyers, the number of aircraft that could be, they overestimated the number that could be determined to be basically be compliant with a simple push, right, update, which actually ended up coming from a DJI document. There's 93% of the commercial, and I think it was 20% of the recreational could be updated with a simple push notification kind of firmware update. But in reality, that's not going to work for a lot of recreational, and even a lot of the commercial aren't going to be able to be standard, because I don't know really that many unmanned aircraft that are commercial that have a actual pressure altimeter on the controller as well as the aircraft. There's a whole bunch of factual issues stuff there. There's some discussions going on presently right now where the FAA is trying to figure out if they want to have the signal frequency for the broadcast to be on a unlicensed band, such as like Part 15. So like your 2.4 or 5.8, there's a lot of technical issues there, and just in regards to range, the noise floor, Wi-Fi is going to be causing all sorts of interference and noise there. There's also going to be some difficulties for manned aircraft to actually pick up those frequencies, right? Because there's an issue if you're talking, but nobody's listening, it doesn't really do much for safety. And that was one of the issues that the FAA has even identified with some requests for information that they put out recently after the rulemaking, the comments, and they were asking the manned aircraft, well, they are asking everybody in general regarding how a low-flying unmanned aircraft or manned aircraft could benefit from the broadcasting. And there were some responses, and some of the manned aircraft were like, it's not really going to do too much for safety. There's a noise saturation. There's an issue that you're going to have to actually install the equipment. It's going to get expensive. And what's the benefit to manned aircraft, right? You would just probably fly higher than 400 feet to just try to avoid that overall. So the FAA maybe want to come back and say, hey, we're not going to do it on ISM. We're going to do it on ADS-B frequencies, right? The 978 or the 1090 megahertz. But some of their assumptions there. So, I mean, there's a lot of technical issues here. There's some legal issues here. There's a lot of different issues going on here. It's all going to be dependent primarily upon the final rule on how it comes out and whether it restricts the FPV flyers, whether they can actually fly freely.
Yeah, I mean, I think what I'm hearing is there's a lot of different potential avenues to challenge this, and that's, I guess, one of the everybody I talk to about this says, "What about US v. Cosby? Have you guys heard about that?" And I'm like, that's like the most obvious avenue for a layperson, but probably not the best. And you won't know what the best avenue of attack is until you see the final ruling, and then you kind of sit down and put your heads together and figure out how to challenge this most effectively. But the takeaway, I guess, is that, like, Tyler, I know when you said, if this goes, we're going to challenge this legally, there were some skeptics. Some people have said, whatever happened to that, and is that actually happening? And as far as I can tell, what we're hearing is that it is going to happen. It's happening.
Oh yeah, no doubt. I mean, we like I said, we have every intent, and that's what we've. While we're staying broad here, and people are going to be like, well, what do you actually plan on doing? And that's very personal. I mean, it's kind of like it's like showing the other team your playbook, or hey,
right.
Here's the set of plays that we're going to run. If you do this, here's what we're doing. And so it's important to just for people to understand that. And but what we've been doing, to answer your question, is really getting super deep and in the weeds about every little possible issue legally that the NPRM could. And so when what I presume John will do when the rule comes out is we'll look at it and say, okay, this is compared to the original rule, they kept this, they kept this, but all right, they fixed that. Sweet. We'll draw a line through some of the issues that we had previously researched and jotted down. But it's so important to remember that, and a lot of people said this when I first announced it, they're like, why are you wasting your time? Like, it's going to come out, and then when it comes out, then see what you got to do. We have 60 days, right?
Right.
So, and that is not, this is not, just to get out there, form a legal team, get everything, agreed to, yada, yada. That a couple-week process. And then you got to do the research, and you got to actually get it filed, right? And so, John, we've talked about a couple of cases where the FAA has put something out, and people have put in their appeals on day 61, or like a couple hours after it's closed, and they've said case closed, denied. You missed it. Sorry. Okay. And so, we really thought that the issue is too important for that to happen. And we want to be, I would rather the case be someone say, well, you wasted some money. And then I can say, well, we were very prepared, and
right.
I think it's kind of shaping up to where, and, it's to know what other companies and other organizations are planning and how quickly they're going to release and whatnot. I've certainly been very open that we are and we will respond to this very quickly. So, while we'll take our time and make sure that what we submit is complete and wholesome, we've really done a lot of that work up front. So, hopefully that kind of answers the question.
So approximately the time frame we're looking at right now is December 2020 is when the rule is expected to be published. At that point, a 60-day window opens for sort of legal challenges, and within that window, you guys hope to respond to any specific aspects of that final wording, but you won't know what you're going to have to say until you see the final wording. And at that point, it then goes to the courts, and fortunately, there is at least a 48-month window for compliance. So our lives aren't going to change as hobbyists, for at least 2 years from December 2020. And hopefully by the time that rolls through, your legal challenge or other legal challenges, or I don't know, something will have changed to allow us to continue to build quadcopters and fly them with the kind of freedom, maybe not all of the freedoms, but at least some of the freedoms that we currently enjoy.
Yep, definitely. And so, it's important to also note that while we're here to represent FPV, this NPRM, whether we get the result that we want from it or not, doesn't just FPV. It doesn't just affect hobbyists. There are some very, very deep issues that could be brought up as part of this. And John, if I'm overstepping here, then we'll cut this out. But for example, we talked about where the FAA is mandated that they can rule over navigable airspace, right? Mm-hmm. But their rule that they wrote is for United States airspace. And so what the courts have never really had to decide is where exactly does the airspace that the government can tell you what to do with start? Does it start at the blades of your grass? Does it start at the soil? Does it start at the topmost thing on your property, right? How exactly does that work? And that's never been an issue that's brought up. And that, in my opinion, we've talked about this. I've talked about this on other forums before, where like, hey, this could go to the Supreme Court, and that, in my opinion, would be a Supreme Court type level issue that could come out of this NPRM, where we start having people, for example, go and fly a paper in their backyard and say, "Look, come and get me, FAA." Regulate this.
Yeah. One of the weird things that I read about was the FAA said that their goal was that within, I think it was 3 years, no SUAS would be sold in the United States that was not RemoteID compliant, which means it has to have some method of detecting and reporting its location. In other words, GPS. And someone said, well, I'm going to fly inside an auditorium. Is that the navigable airspace? No, you're inside a building. Oh, but you can't buy a drone that will fly without a GPS lock. So I take it inside the auditorium, it can't get a GPS lock, and it refuses to take off. And the argument was, you are effectively regulating something that is not in the navigable airspace of the United States, which you're not allowed. There's a couple races that take place in giant salt mines and caves. And it's like, are you going to tell me that a cave 1,000 feet underground is part of the navigable airspace of the United States? Apparently the FAA can regulate that. It's probably not the first argument you're going to take to court. I want to fly in caves. But it seemed to me to really illustrate the ridiculousness and the overreach of this regulation.
Yeah. Does that, I know this is all kind of layman's terms as I understand it, but anything to add there, John?
There's a lot to be said about all of that.
and it will be said in court filings, but I know you don't want to tip your hand so I will let you beg off of that one. Here's the thing. So this is the situation as it stands right now. I wanted you guys to come on here so that people could know that the fight was continuing, that the next stage of the fight was happening. It didn't just end with the letter writing and the comments, and we don't just have to roll over and take whatever we get or become outlaws, that people are still fighting. You guys came on here because you had something to say, and what is it that you want people to take away from this video or to do in response to this?
Yeah, I mean, for me, the biggest thing would be that if you are aware of something that is potentially fishy going on with the FAA and working with other entities or communicating with them outside of the rulemaking process regarding unmanned remote identification for unmanned aircraft, then what would be very helpful is if you could communicate with us or email Tyler or me regarding that information. And so that would be one extremely helpful piece of info if you could provide that.
Yeah, and so that's super super specific. I more broadly, like if you know anything fishy, right, and you kind of want to tip us off, it's not too late
It feels like you're kind of winking and raising your eyebrows about something, but I'm at least a little bit lost. When you say fishy, John, earlier when we were talking, you used the phrase ex parte communication, and I have no idea what that is. Are you able to be any more specific about what kind of fishiness that you're looking to be notified about? Because I'm a little lost.
Yeah, I think to make it more clear would be that without using ex parte would be that if you are aware of the FAA actively working on trying to develop standards or how to do certain things regarding remote identification specifically that has not been put into the record. So if they're working with private industry groups, companies, law enforcement, or any of that type of stuff, and we are well aware of the FAA docket posting to where they did an invite only to law enforcement for remote identification demo over at the FBI headquarters. But if you're aware of anything that's similar to that, it would be very helpful if you could contact Tyler and I.
Because the rulemaking process is a legally defined process that they have to go through. And if they are making rules outside of that process, then that would be interesting, I think is what you're saying.
Interesting. That's one way to put it.
I'm trying to borrow your lawyerly talent for understatement.
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, if there's something fishy, just, if you see smoke, let us know, right? Okay. You think there's fire there? If you smell smoke, just say something.
Okay. All right, Tyler, anything else before we go?
Yeah, definitely. So, right now, John, I do plan on, in the future, publishing some documents relating to this whole FAA fight. And so, for anybody else that's looking to challenge us legally, or if you're interested in it, you're more than welcome to use those documents, spread them, contact your congressman and say, hey, look what I found. Why is this, etc. Cool. And then the last thing would be donations, right? So I had actively, when we first announced this, kind of said, no, like, I don't want it. And there are a lot of people wanting to help out and donate. And so now is that time, frankly. So, I mean,
because John, you're doing this pro bono, right? No, I'm just teasing you.
I have a lot of litigation in the past I've done was all pro bono, right? So, but at this moment, no.
I didn't mean to make it awkward, John. I think what I'm saying, Tyler, is that in the past when you said, "Oh, here we have a GoFundMe if anybody wants to contribute," it was all sort of vague. And now there is an actual lawyer, a team of lawyers who are being paid to fight this fight, and that money has actually got a concrete place to go.
Yes. Yep. I mean, we've already put tens of thousands of dollars into just the research that's taken place. Never mind getting everything filed, and then God forbid if we have to actually go litigate. So
I got to say, I know that whenever in my life, rarely, I have had the prospect of a court case come up. The first thing I want is for it to go away. I'm never excited about that. But the thought of us going and actually challenging the FAA in court just gave me just a little bit of a tingle just now. But I'm not the one who's going to have to pay for it.
Well, no, I mean, look, I said this when I first put out there, whether you donate or help out in some way or not, this is going to happen. But it is not, I think we can all realize that the more force that we have behind this, the better argument we can make, the better team that we can build, and legal hours that we can put towards this. Yeah.
All right. Well, I will put relevant information in the video description below. Contact information, GoFundMe link, or whatever else you guys tell me to put down there so that people can get a hold of you and contribute. And I hope to talk to you again at some point in the future when we can either get an update or maybe good news. So thank you guys for coming on.
Thank you, Joshua.
Thank you.
Awesome. What are you still doing here? The video's over. Do you watch all the videos all the way to the end? Wow. You are a super fan. Thank you. That actually helps the channel a lot when you watch the videos all the way to the end. YouTube loves that. You know what else YouTube loves? When you subscribe. Or when you join my Patreon for as little as $2 a month or more if you feel like I've earned. Actually, YouTube doesn't like you to join my Patreon. They don't get a cut of that.